All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Teresa Lucas, and I am your Zoom host for today's discussion. This discussion is being recorded and will be posted to the library's YouTube channel. I would like to thank the American Library Association for the Libraries Transforming Communities grant that made this event possible, and thank you, Ellen, for agreeing to be our Zoom author today. For security purposes, if you are a student and are using your real name, please change it to an alias. To change your name, click on Participants at the bottom of your screen. On the right hand, a menu of names appears. On your name, click More and rename yourself. Mrs. Nordhall is your co-host and will help me monitor chat. Questions and comments submitted through chat will only be seen by the two of us. Any questions that you have are important, and we will do our best to address them. With housekeeping out of the way, I am honored to introduce our speaker, Ellen Hopkins. Ellen is a poet, freelance writer, and award-winning author with 13 New York Times bestselling novels to her credit. Wait, you told me it was 14. I was mistaken. 14 New York Times bestselling novels to her credit. She has published hundreds of articles and is a regular speaker at schools, book festivals, and conferences across the globe. I discovered Ellen Hopkins in library school. The first book I read was Crank, followed by Glass. I read all of her YA books that year. Ellen writes candidly about tough subjects that many people are afraid to talk about. She writes from experience, captivating readers of all ages with her unique writing style. Readers quickly become enveloped in her books and experience many emotions that include disappointment, frustration, anger, empathy, and hope. Ellen has been called the best-selling living poet in the country. She has over 4 million books in print and is the author of 18 books, all of which have been on the New York Times bestseller list. Ellen has earned numerous awards, including YALSA's Top 10 for Teens, ALA's Top 10 for Young Adults, ALA's Best Books for Young Adults, and Kirkus Best Book for Teens. Please join me with a warm welcome for Ellen Hopkins.
Hey, you guys. Welcome virtually to my abode here in Northern Nevada, where it's lovely outside today. And I hope someday y'all will come visit here because you would love it here. It's actually pretty close to like where you guys are, probably landscape-wise. I think we have a little bit more mountains around, but that's about it. Anyway, I'm going to get started here with, if I can get my screen sharing thing up, with a little PowerPoint presentation about me, because that's kind of what I do. But here, let's try this. All right. Can you see that? Everybody good with that? Yep. Okay. So we'll get started here. This is me, or some of me anyway. Let's see. So to start with, I was adopted as a baby. As you can see from these pictures, my parents were older. My dad was 72 when he adopted me, and my mom was 42. And to put that in some perspective for you, he was born in 1883, and that actually does make me pretty old too. But we'll just skip that part of it for right now. I grew up. He was the son of German immigrants into San Francisco. Came from a very poor family, built a 6th grade education into some businesses that, I mean, he was a really brilliant man with only a 6th grade education, but back then you could do that. And he defined self-made man. He built a couple of businesses. One was a steel company that made a lot of money in World War II when they needed steel for the war effort. Let's see what we got next here. I grew up in Palm Springs. I don't know if you guys know anything about Palm Springs, but it's about 120 in the summer. So in the summer, we would go north and like summer up at Tahoe or at Napa, someplace we would get a cabin and we go up and get out of the heat. So, and that part of my childhood ended up moving into my later life as well. But I grew up in an area with it was a pretty nice neighborhood. There were sports stars and movie stars, most of whom you've never heard of because you guys weren't born when they were sports and movie stars. But one I know you've heard of, Elvis Presley lived around the corner. And yes, I got to meet Elvis Presley one time. My little brother was selling Cub Scout tickets. And so we were just ringing random doorbells in the neighborhood, right? And Elvis Presley lived behind this big wall compound, but his gates were open. So we're like, so we walk up to his door and we rang the doorbell and he answered in his boxers. So I have seen Elvis Presley in his underwear and it was not particularly attractive. No. Let's see here. From my dad, I learned the value of honesty and hard work. He was like the hardest working person I've ever met, and honest. Like as far as I know, he never told a lie. If you've read my books or if you read my books, I write honestly, and I write hard subject matter, but I write as honestly about it as I can because I believe that I have a lot of respect for my readers. I think the truth is important, and knowing the truth of the things that I write about is important because it helps open minds, it helps develop empathy, understanding, insight, and those things are so important. From my mom, that's my mom doing Shakespeare at Ashland, actually. She loved books, she loved classic literature, she loved poetry, and she instilled that in me, this love of language. She used to read to my little brother and I every day. Like, I think I was probably the first 5-year-old that could quote Dickens because she was reading us Dickens when we were little. But yeah, so she encouraged me to become a writer if that's what I wanted to be. And that is what I wanted to be, although it took me a little while to get here. Published my first poem when I was 9. So it was a haiku that I do not remember, but it must have been magnificent because I wrote it and also because it published. So I saw my name in print for the first time at 9 years old. Haiku by Ellen Whitener, and I'm like, published poet here. And I continued actually to publish poetry all the way up through high school. I was always a creative writing geek. I won the creative writing contest. That was who I was in school. So what I write in my books is narrative verse, so verse that tells a story. I also write lyric poetry. I play with formal poetry. This is a poem I wrote that I kind of love because it's about writing poetry. And just to give you a little context, we live on the eastern slope of the Sierra. And so most of our storms come in from the southwest, from the Pacific over the Sierra. Once in a while we get the storms, they call them backdoor storms, that come around from the northeast. So that's what the reference here of this poem is about. A poem comes, a backdoor storm, sliding in from the northeast, a surprise. It reveals itself as sunrise lifts its countenance above muted hills. It scatters silver light across the winter-plumped valley. It swells, contracts, bursts with the brass song of saxophones. It floats on a wind-risen mist, perfumed with rain-spattered sage. It says goodnight, paw prints in a sponge of desert sand. And so I hope you can see how, the imagery and the word sounds, and also when you're writing poetry, to say out loud, when you're writing, it's better not to actually write things like bursts with the brass song of saxophones, because you get kind of when you're reading out loud. Studied journalism in college. If you've read Crank or you know the story behind it, you will have met my ex-husband in that book, because Crank is definitely my family story. It's very much inspired by my family story. The ex-husband in that book is very much like my ex-husband. I met him in college, not the best decision of my life, probably to drop out of college and get married and have a couple of kids in my early 20s, but that's what I did. And at 21, I actually had 2 businesses of my own. I had a catering service and a video, like, you guys remember video stores? You probably don't, huh? We used to have to actually rent videos. They didn't stream. We didn't even have computers back then. I know, I told you I'm old, right? But I was always early to seeing technology up and coming, so I could see that video was going to be a big thing. I built my own video store, which I later sold out. And when I sold that video store, I was able to finance my way into writing for a living. So it all worked out in the end, but it took a while to get here. So anyway, I had all this, I had money coming in from these businesses, but I had no money in the bank. And I started to wonder why not, you know, like, why can't I buy diapers this week? And so I started looking and I discovered my ex was using cocaine. I gave him the choice, family, cocaine. He chose cocaine, moved to Albuquerque to get high, and continued to get high there for until about 7 or 8 years ago when he had a massive heart attack. That didn't kill him, but he did die of complications from his drug use, his addictions, just a few years ago. So I met my current husband, and that's been a long time. I call him Mr. Mostly Right because it's been like 30, we met 1984. You guys do the math. And so there are days when it's like, okay, I guess we'll stick. So we've been together a long time. And when we got together, we were both coming off of bad relationships. We moved to Tahoe because I had spent summers there. He had spent summers there as a kid as well. We wanted a fresh start and we moved to Tahoe. You guys know that there's snow here in Northern Nevada, but a lot of people across the country have no idea that it snows in Nevada. They'd be like, you snow in Nevada? I'd be like, yep, we sure do. So I like to put pictures of snow in when I do these presentations. When I moved to Tahoe, I decided to pull on my journalistic roots. So I went into freelance writing. I was a food and wine writer for a while. I wrote ski articles. And the fun thing about being a freelance writer and writing that kind of stuff is like I got to ski for free. I got to eat at all the best restaurants for free. So that was pretty fun. In researching some of the articles, like this, the picture of me with the orca, I was not only trained orcas in captivity with SeaWorld trainers, but I also got to study orcas off the Puget Sound in the wild, and that was great. And the picture with me with the plane, that's me with Hoop Gibson, who's a shuttle pilot. In Reno, we do Cleveland style pylon air racing. So that was me researching an article for that. Those two became the seeds of my first 2 nonfiction books for kids. That I decided that I was raising kids. I'm like, well, I could write books for kids. I actually thought I was going to write picture books, but that is not my strong suit. Like entire story arcs in 500 words ain't happening here. No. But those were the beginnings of the seeds for like Orcas, which is my first book, and Air Devils, which is my second, nonfiction books, mostly for middle grade, some YA as well, biography, science, etc. So if you guys are thinking about writing for a living, novels are not the only way to make money writing for a living. Freelance journalism, like we really need super solid journalists right now. And also nonfiction, because there will always be a market for nonfiction because we learn new things every day. So the knowledge we have from 50 years ago is not going to be relevant today. So there will always be a place there for books or articles or whatever. So let's see here. So these are my YA books. Crank was the first, Glass and Fallout, which are the 2 that come after the sequels, Burned and Smoke, which deal with kind of abuse in the face of religion, Impulse and Perfect, which deal with teen suicide, Tricks and Traffic, which deal with teen prostitution, identical childhood sexual abuse. And so you can see gun violence. You can see that I've chosen topics that are affecting young people every single day, but that a lot of people kind of choose to overlook. I think it's important that we expose the problems, try to find understanding and help for the people going through them. And it's just this idea too of empathy, that I hope the people that are not going through them will read my books and develop empathy for those who are. I think it's like really important too to encourage young people who might be having an issue with sexual abuse or thoughts of suicide or whatever, to stand up and say something sooner rather than later. So I am encouraging them to use their voices and stand up here. The You I've Never Known, which actually deals another little piece of my life, which was that my ex-husband kidnapped my daughter out of daycare, and I lost her for 3 years. So that's kind of a seed in that book. So pieces of my life inspire my books, pieces of friends' lives inspire my books. Sometimes just news story or whatever. I don't know. People are like, where do you get your ideas? I'm like, they're all around. They're floating all around there. You just kind of got to grab them and stick them down. So if you've read Crank, then you understand that this is my daughter, Crystal, Christina in the book, Crystal in real life. The Crank and Glass books are about 60% fact, 40% fictionalized. So I changed characters so it wouldn't be too close to the real people. So like in the book, I have an older daughter who's gay and a younger son, right? And in real life, I have an older son who's gay and a younger daughter. So I just switch things around like that a little bit. But the picture in the middle here, that is her the weekend before she went down to see her dad. So that is who she was before she went to see him. She was a straight A+ kid. Her dream was computer animation, and she had the talent to do it. She was on a fast track to a full scholarship at the Art Institute of Seattle. And instead she went to visit her dad, which was something I did try to avoid for a long time, but he was getting remarried and he wanted to see the kids. So I sent her and her brother down to see their dad, and she came home a different person. So she met a guy, turned her on and to meth, and her dreams were gone at 17 years old. She came home, she started school, her straight A grades were like out, gone. She was out the window at night, she's getting in trouble. So I started looking for like what happened to my kid, and I found drugs in her stuff. And we tried, without putting her in lockdown, we tried outpatient rehab, we tried counseling, and we tried everything we could, but the nature of that drug is you really have to want to get clean. And she didn't, and she wouldn't have, except in her senior year. Well, yeah, she did get pregnant. So my husband and I ended up adopting Hunter in the book, Orion in real life. Get it? Orion the Hunter? See, people are like, do you do that on purpose? I'm like, listen, if it's in my books, it's on purpose, okay? That's because I wrote them, yeah. So for her, she's been in and out of addiction, periods of sobriety, sometimes long periods of sobriety, and then she'll slip up and she'll move back into an addictive phase. About 8 years ago, God, it's almost 9 now, she had a super giant relapse, really horrible relapse, where her children, the 3 on the other side, were in danger, and I had to take custody of those 3 children. So Clyde came to us at 9, Star and Caleb at 3 and 4. And so we've been raising another generation of kids here. Clyde came to us with some issues. PTSD was a diagnosis because of some trauma suffered at the hands of boyfriends over the years. And so he came to us with some problems that he's outgrew them, and he's done very well. He's like his mom. He's like really a brilliant kid who can do anything he puts his mind to, but emotionally he still has some issues because of that early childhood trauma. Now I moved into middle grade, and this is closer to nowhere, my first middle grade book. So the content is a little less raw, I guess, but it's addressing important issues. So Cal in this book is very much, it's not, his story is not the same, but the kid inside Cal is the same as the kid inside Clyde. So Clyde, who came to us wanting to control himself, having a hard time to control like meltdowns and, like PTSD, when too much is coming at you, you kind of pull into a corner and pull up your hoodie or scream or fall on the floor or whatever when you're 9 years old. And Cal has similar issues when he comes to live with his aunt and uncle and cousin, wanting to make friends, but finding it very, very difficult to make friends because of things that he can't control. So it's a story about these cousins, and Hannah, who's like the kid that's all with it, she's got everything going on for her, can't stand her cousin at first, but as they learn to live together and adjust to each other, it's really about how love takes over eventually, and they become pretty much best of friends. So these are just some personal things about me now. We are San Francisco fans. I've been a San Francisco Giants fan since I was a little kid and used to go to Candlestick in the summer. That is actually the one with Orion as a little toddler there. That was closing day at Candlestick Park, the last day the Giants played at Candlestick Park. We watched Matt Williams hit the winning home run. And then Niners played there for a couple more seasons. Now they both have new parks. The other park there is Oracle Park. It's the new Giants Park. I garden. That's my vegetable garden a couple years ago. I love to cook and bake. I can and preserve. So that's how I spend my falls, really, is picking stuff and making salsa, canning salsa. But the most important thing to me overall, over all these years, is family. So this is my family. In this corner up here, we have my younger daughter, Kelly, and her husband, Kino. Underneath them is the three kids that we had and their two boys. The one with Orion in the hippie shirt, hippie, plays guitar. Now he's starting to engineer music. He's doing really well now, but it took a long time. But those 6 kids, those are 6 of Crystal's 7 kids. So 7 kids she's had over the years, all with different dads. That was the first time those 6 kids had ever all been together. So I went and picked up one in Phoenix and one in way Southern California, and I brought them up so that they could get to know each other. And now they're friends. You know, they do FaceTime together and stuff, so they know each other now. Underneath that, that's Crystal now and her youngest little boy, Kason, who just turned 6 with Heaven. Up here is Jason, my older son. That's my husband and I in Costa Rica, which, by the way, if you can ever go to Costa Rica, it rocks because it's like rainforest. It's like amazing. That's my dog, Win, who does not get to get on the couch. Yeah, he spends a lot of time on the couch. And that's our new puppy, Sansa. She's actually a little bigger than that now, but yeah, she's pretty cute. And so this is the last slide. This is kind of cool. I have a friend who's doing this project called Codex. He is putting together time capsules to send to the moon. And he's putting in them like on discs, books, music, artwork, and poetry. And so he chose this poem of mine to send to the moon. It's going to the moon in November on SpaceX, which I think is pretty dang cool, right? So I'll read this one to you as a goodbye here. This I wrote for my grandson Eli right after he was born. Postpartum. I want to whisper gifts of wisdom, fill your vacant reservoir with a downpour of truth, my views. But if I slide into your own perfect point of view, every need fulfilled in the nook of an elbow beneath a generous breast, I wonder if wisdom isn't truly instinct and something relentlessly stolen away. I want to promise you peace, life filled with possibilities, devoid of stark realities beyond your power to change. But as you fall asleep to a lullaby of violence on the evening news, you grasp my thumb with tiny, trusting fingers, and I understand all hope of future sanity curls within your hands. I want to give you God, swaddle you in omnipotence, blanket you with splendor, rock you upon the wings of seraphim. But when you fix me with blue slate eyes, I tumble down into those cobalt depths, misty corridors of innocence, and I stumble over God, born into this world again, inside of you. And so Eli, my grandson, is going to the moon with me, which I think is double cool. So anyway, awesome. So let me stop screen sharing here, and then we can take some questions because we've got just about 13 minutes. So yes.
All right, thank you. So if everybody would like to submit questions during the chat, I'll get to as many of them as I can, but I have some that people submitted ahead of time, and so I'll start with those. Has your daughter read this book?
So yeah, she's read it. I started the book when she went to prison. So she's been in jail a few times. She went to jail for trafficking stuff. She got out when she turned state's evidence. Later, she went to prison for ID theft, check kiting, and the things that they were doing basically to support their habit. So she was in prison for 2 years in Jean, Nevada. And when she went to prison, I kind of needed some understanding of that time, like what part I might have played in those choices. So I wrote the book originally for me, and she wasn't necessarily real happy about it, but she was in prison and I'm like, what are you gonna do about it? No, it wasn't exactly like that. But when she got out and she could see, the book has done a lot of good. It's helped many, many people develop understanding of their parents or their kids, or decide they didn't want to go down the same path she did, or for some kids they became drug counselors or psychologists because they read my books and that book specifically. So when she saw how much good it was doing, more of the stories in Glass, which is the sequel to this book, actually came from her. None of the stories in Crank came from her, except for I found her journal, I found letters from the boyfriend in New Mexico. She told her sister stuff, I talked to her friends. So those stories, they happened, but I wasn't there to see them. So which is another reason why I fictionalized, because I wanted to get the character right, even if it wasn't exactly her. It's totally inspired by her. So yeah, so she's read the book and she's good with it, actually, and she's good with it. It's going to be a movie. They're going to start filming hopefully in the fall, and she's good with that as well. So with sharing her life, she knows that she has helped other people through these situations too.
Thank you. Another question is, how did you cope with your daughter doing drugs? I know people who have different ways of coping, and when my mom was on drugs, I learned how to longboard. So what did you do to deal with this?
I wrote. I mean, I did. I wrote a lot. I mean, I wrote poetry. And then I wrote the book. And I thought about it for a long time and how important it was to let all that stuff out. And it's like there are pieces in some of my books that are pieces of my teen years that I carried with me for a long time and never really talked about. Like there's a scene in one of them where the boyfriend of the protagonist is killed in a car wreck, and my first love of my life was killed in the drunk driving accident. And so I carried that with me for a long time, and I got to actually write it out many, many years later through in a book.
What did you do to prepare for writing Crank? Did you research or talk to others before writing? You did say that you talked to other people about it.
Right. And of course, I mean, I researched the brain chemistry part of that was important for me to know anyway for myself, right? Because the brain actually does, the drug actually does alter your brain chemistry, which is why it's so addictive. It's interesting. The things that, like, you see pictures of what people don't realize is the drug is like manufactured with caustic chemicals, acetone and lye, and chemicals that actually eat into you. So when you see pictures of meth addicts with their teeth that are rotten, it's not because they grind their teeth. It's because all those caustic chemicals, you put them in your bloodstream, they go through your bloodstream and they come down inside into your teeth roots. So that's what happens there. It also eats into your brain, like all those veins in your brain, all that stuff is moving through, and it creates big holes in your brain. If you see pictures of meth addicts' brains, there are black spots, and that's what those are.
Is there a big difference between Crank and other drugs on your body?
It is, I mean, there is. It's actually, heroin is actually better for you, like physically, than meth for sure, as long as you're getting, good heroin. I mean, I don't like to say good heroin, but not rotten
I
heroin.
understand. You briefly talked about this, but what motivated you to write other books besides the Crank series? And can you tell us a little bit about those books?
Right, so I'll give you some of those. And like when I decided I wanted to write about teen suicide because I had a really good friend who lost her 16-year-old son to suicide. So, and I want to understand the why, the reasons why. Identical is about childhood sexual abuse at the hands of a father. And I had 4 friends actually who went through that as young children. One was all the way, as young as 6. And so I want to understand the why, and also for us to be able to recognize what possible victims look like or possible perpetrators look like. And they don't always look like what you think. People are good at hiding who they are on both sides of that. So to be able to develop some understanding of these things, I think it's really important for young readers and for adult readers as well.
How did you come to the decision to use free verse to write your books? What writers do you feel have influenced your writing style?
So again, I was a poet first, And I started Crank in prose, and the voice in the book was all wrong because I wanted to write from her point of view. I didn't want a memoir, I wanted to write from her point of view. And so it was my voice in prose. In poetry is about how the poet views the world. It's a very interior form of writing. So to be able to use poetry, I was able to climb inside her head better. And I guess, I mean, I don't think, I actually, there were a few people writing verse novels then. Sonia Sones was one, and I saw her book, which was about her sister's descent into schizophrenia. And I thought, personal story in verse, that works, let me try it. And it worked for me as well. I actually think I opened up that area quite a bit. There were very few verse novelists then. There were a few middle grade and Sonia, and then I kind of opened it up. And now there's all these wonderful verse novels out there. You can find them, like, they're diverse and they're interesting, and they're from all different parts of the country, and it's just crazy. So I think, and I'm gonna take a little credit for opening up that landscape.
I love that you write in verse. It adds to the story. If you wrote in traditional format, do you think your books would have the same impact on the reader?
And I really don't, because again, I think the verse helps you jump inside the characters. And it's more like it's like you're living the story rather than being told the story. And that's the kind of difference, I think, between verse and prose. Prose, a lot of times, all those lengthy passages and descriptions and all that, they can add to a story, but they can also take away, especially for kind of more reluctant readers that don't love to read. I think verse definitely pulls them in because there's a musicality to it. There's a beauty to the language. So it's a different thing, and it is harder to write in verse, I promise you, than it is to write in prose.
Why did Christina try meth the very first time?
For her, I mean, it was all about fitting in. We just had the Crank is going on stage in Reno, and we brought in a community outreach kind of person who used to be an addict, and he talked about how people use drugs. It might start out as something you do at a party or whatever, but people use them when you really get into using them to try to find solutions to problems. So for her problem was she felt like she didn't fit in. She was really bright, so she felt like she wasn't going to be popular, right? So she wanted to be popular, and she also said she used to be fearful, and she used the drug to kind of conquer those fears, fearful of going to school and being in that space because she felt like the odd person out. So for her, it was a solution to that problem.
Thank you. Is she still smart like that? I mean, after all these years, or has it totally changed her personality?
Oh no, I mean, she definitely lost the ability to do something. One thing you lose the ability to do is to stay focused. So for all the project, like a lot of times meth addicts will have like 8 projects going and they finish none of them. And that was what she did. You lose focus, and there are parts of her brain that are no longer there. And that's just the way, the drug works on the brain. So if you use a little bit, as long as those synapses can fire across those dead spots, then you can maintain brain function. But the bigger those spots are, and your brain can't repair itself, the bigger those black spots in your brain are, then you lose that part of your brain, basically. And what you lose a lot of is emotion. It's the emotional center, the pleasure center. That's where the drug hits, is the pleasure center of your brain. So for her, it was hard for her to love her kids. It was hard for her to stay, focused on one person, to be in love. And that's pretty sad.
We have a chat message came in. How can we find out about the production of Crank in Reno?
It's Theater Works of Northern Nevada, and it's RE, Theater Works. It's going to be the last weekend of May, the first 2 weekends in June, and they're going to live stream the last weekend. So you would be able to come watch a live stream of it. And I think Saturdays are evening performances and Sundays are matinees. So if one of those would work. And then, like I said, it's going to be a movie too at some point here. So we're fingers crossed for that too.
And when do you think the movie will be out?
You know, it's because movie options are so strange. You know, it's been optioned for a while, and the production company guy, he kind of didn't find the financing, but through that, it moved into like, I don't know if you guys have heard of Bella Thorne, but it's her family that's now re-optioning the movie, the book. And so we have a script already in place. It's just a matter of that one option has to be up so they can re-option it. And it's just the business end of it. But we have a script. We have Nick Cassavetes is probably going to come in and direct. I mean, we have some great people on board with the project. And so I'm pretty excited.
Great. Other than just saying no, what advice can you give teens about their lives?
Just to remember that your choices, it isn't just your life. Your life belongs to everybody that loves you. So whether that's siblings or your parents or, you know, a partner or just friends, those people, if you lose yourself, those people lose you too. Like for Crystal, her little sister, she pushed her out of her life for a long, long time. And her little sister was devastated by that because they were so close. So your life belongs to everybody that loves you. And to remember that, and also to remember that what's vital to us all is love, to love and to be loved. So to give love, give love and take love. But put yourself first. Don't put a partner first. Put yourself first.
Thank you. Do you have any advice for parents who might have children who might be involved in drugs? There might be some parents in the audience that are concerned about that.
Yeah, the first thing that, you know, is communication is vital. And what I love when parents actually like pull out Crank and read it with their kids, because it gives them a way to assess, but also to open up channels of dialogue, which is really, really important for parents and kids, because kids, like my mom and dad, don't care, you know, they set themselves up as the enemy. So you have to present yourself not as a punitive space, but as a help. And that's really important. And to be aware, like if there are changes in your kid, look and see what those changes are, and don't wait. It's really important.
Do you think things would have turned out differently if you did nothing wrong, but if you'd have known sooner about Christina, do you think you could have changed things if you'd have known sooner?
I think what we would have done differently is put her in a lockdown rehab, but we weren't aware enough about the drug and about really how how overwhelming it is. You know, it's like, because when I grew up, I mean, there was weed in high school. That's what I saw when I was in high school, you know. I didn't see meth. I didn't really realize what it was. So I think, and again, knowledge is important. So, you know, arm yourself with knowledge always. But yeah, there were things I would have done differently probably. And, you know, your first reaction is the emotional. Is anger, you know, or, you know, how could you do this to me? And it's not really about you. And I think probably that was one of the mistakes that we made, you know, and we should have made it be more about her right away and how we could have helped her stronger, you know, because outpatient rehab worked to a point, but not enough.
Oh, I think the students are leaving. The bell has probably rung. Oh, somebody says, is her daughter sober now?
She is. She's doing well now. She's been sober, as far as I can tell, for about 4 years. She's kept a good job. All of a sudden, she's like kind of thriving. She'll be moving back to Reno here this summer from Missouri. So we'll see. We're going to be putting stuff back together, and that's really important for us all to be able to put our lives back together. And forgiveness and reconciliation is like huge, and it's never too late for that.
That's right. So there are still 24 people in the class. Would you like to keep going with Q&A?
Sure.
Okay. Go ahead and send your questions through chat and I'll ask them. Another question that we had from before is, what are you working on now?
So right now, so I've got another middle grade that'll be out in September. That's already, I just saw the cover. It's beautiful. It's crazy. And so I'm doing copy edits on that. I'm revising a 2022 YA. It's a near future, which I wrote in prose, and they told me to put it in verse. So I'm putting it in verse and deciding what's important to keep. So that's a very kind of different book for me. So I'm doing that. And then I'll have another YA out in 2023 that I have to write before fall. And it's going to deal with the foster care system, which is something that I've been involved in through some of the nonprofit stuff that we were doing, helping kids, aged out foster kids into college and housing. So I'm really aware of the good and the bad within that system. And I really, really want to look at that really deeply.
I just thought of something as you were talking. I take care of the YA collection here at my library, and your books are the ones that get stolen the most without being checked out, just taken. I'll go to get one and it's gone, and it's supposed to be available. So kids really like your books.
A Barnes and Noble in New Jersey told me the 3 most stolen books were graphic novels, my novels, and the Bible. And I'm like, the Bible? Who steals the Bible? It's pretty funny.
I have another question. Where did Bree come from? Was she always lurking in the shadows? I feel Christina was a goody two-shoes and Bree was hiding, waiting to escape. Could you tell the difference when you encountered Bree? Well, that was a 2-part question.
Right. I mean, after a while, you definitely could tell the difference. And for Crystal actually became Sarah when she went out to party. And it was, she really did think that gave her a sense of anonymity, which it didn't. Like the whole thing with her going to juvenile hall and couldn't get out until his parents came and got her, that actually happened. So there was that. But I also think having this alter ego allowed her to do things that she would have hesitated to do as Crystal. I think it kind of gave her it's like acting, a bit of theater, and it gave her a way to become the bad girl instead of always the good girl. So
did she always have her alter ego, or is that something that developed because of the drug use?
I don't think so. I think a lot of that came from being around the kind of party set, and so I guess, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I don't know exactly.
Yeah. Why did Christina keep Hunter? Keeping her in the sense of pregnancy, she decided to go on with pregnancy, and then she brought him home from the hospital rather than putting him up for adoption. It seems like maybe she had hope in herself that she would be able to be a mother to Hunter.
I think so. And with all these pregnancies, she cleaned up during her pregnancies pretty well. There were a couple where she used because she didn't know. And so those kids are the most meth affected now. Within the 2 that she really was kind of using during pregnancy are kind of borderline Asperger. So they're kind of on the spectrum. And I think she wanted to be a good mother, but like I said, that part of your brain, when the emotional part of your brain is damaged, it's hard to put a baby first. You're putting yourself first all the time. And so she failed at parenting. She wanted to be a good parent, but she just didn't have the ability to do that. So I think she brought him home because she wanted to be a mother. But then he was 4 months old when she started using again, and I couldn't leave him because I came home one time. She was crashed on the floor. He was crawling across the top of the stairs, and she couldn't wake up. He's crying because he had dirty diaper, hadn't eaten in hours, and he's crying, screaming, and she's crashed on the floor. I picked her up and I put her outside, and I said, "He's staying, you're leaving, goodbye." Because he was in danger at that point. And so my life then changed because then I had to make the commitment to take care of that child full time.
Those grandkids are very lucky to have you.
They're good kids. They really are, and they're doing well. It's funny, they're all A students, it's like crazy. I'm like, be good kids now, okay? Yeah.
So when I was researching before you came, I read that she had 7 children and that they were living with different family members, and you have 3 of them. Is that correct?
Well, so we've raised 4. She has 1, and then 1 went to live with her aunt, and that was the one that went to Phoenix, her father's sister, right? So she lived with her, and then she's out on her own now. She's 19. She has a baby, so I am actually a great grandmother. And the other one went to live with her father for a little bit, but then his mom took her. So that's heaven. And she's like brilliant. She had her choice of universities, and she's doing really, really well. So it just where they are. One ran off and got pregnant. The other one is going to school and doing great things. So it's just,
Does Hunter have any effects of his Christina's drug abuse?
Other than the fact that he really didn't have a lot of ambition. I think that's, for me, the thing with Orion. It was just no ambition. He was smart. He just didn't care about school. So he was never going to go to college, right? He wanted to be a rock star, except for his rock starring was death metal. I'm like, dude, that is not music. So, but he plays the guitar really well. He'll never be a lead singer, I'll put it that way. But he is starting to engineer music now, though, and lay down tracks. And I mean, he's really, all of a sudden, he's just thriving within that space. So, it's like, and I'm not going to tell anybody they can't try to make a living with their art, because, hello.
Oh, I already asked this about other than just say no. I imagine it was hard to look at Bree in the height of her addiction and to remember your perfect Christina. I imagine that about broke your heart.
It still does. When I look at pictures of her when she was little, and I think about the things that we did, we spent a lot of time together. We camped, we went fishing, we went to travel together, and we were a pretty solid family there for a long time. And so it's painful to watch your child not fail, but to fall under the influence of something that takes away everything good about them, and for a while when they're in heavy, hardcore use, there's not a lot good there. And I can tell you that.
So that is all of our questions. Do you have anything else for the audience?
No, just, I really hope you guys, think about your relationships, whichever side of those relationships you're on, and think about how the other person feels, and get to that, not just how you feel about it, but how the other person feels, because those relationships are always going to mean something to you. Don't throw them away lightly. But again, always hang on to who you are. Don't let somebody else tell you who you are, who you should be. You know who you are. Find your passion, follow your heart. And I always like to say, and reach for the light, because there's darkness and there's light, and you can always reach for the light, even through the darkness.
Thank you, Ellen. This is so amazing that you came and were willing to give up your time to talk to us. We really, really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
And like I've told you, I have wanted this for years. So I'm so thankful that you agreed to be our speaker for North Bend High School Reads. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Take care.
All righty. Bye-bye.